Welcome to the Penny Stamps Distinguished Speaker Series. My name is Christina Hamilton, the series director. Today we bring you a true visionary, a third-generation puppeteer whose artistry has transformed the global landscape of contemporary puppetry, Basil Twist. Yes, I've been waiting a long time for this, folks. A big thank you to our partners for their generous support of today's program, the Institute for the Humanities, and series partners U of M Arts Initiative, Detroit PBS, PBS Books, WNET's All Arts, and Michigan Public 91.7 FM. Out in the lobby today, you will find there is original artworks for sale, courtesy of the student artist collective, The Stampede. Their mission is to bring art to unexpected spaces. The artworks available were all created by Stampede members, and the proceeds go directly to support their creative practices and enable future arts events. So everyone is actually welcome to submit art and attend their events. You can find details and follow them on their Instagram, which is at the Stampede Michigan, and stay tuned for future events. There's one coming up at the beginning of March. And on your way out, if you didn't get a chance to see the artwork, I invite you to please stop by the table and meet the members of the collective and buy yourself some new art. Okay, remember to silence your cell phones. There are microphones at the ends of these aisles. We will have a Q&A today, so you can line up at those mics when the time comes. And now, as we approach St. Valentine's Day, this Saturday, a time for celebrating those who we cherish, I am remembering our beloved series patroness and namesake, Penny Stamps. She brings us all together here today, and Penny envisioned this series as an ever-evolving network, continually expanding from one meaningful connection to another. And Basil's presence here today is a realization of that vision, a blossoming of seeds well sown. What do I mean? Many of you here will recall Machine Dazzle. Oh, I thought there were some fans in the house. Machine took the stage here not so long ago and was a Roman wit artist in residence and created the stunning Ouroboros exhibition at UMA and had a memorable appearance on this stage. Well, it is through our continuing relationship with Machine Dazzle that we find ourselves graced with Basil's presence today. And I know that our dear Penny would delight in seeing this connection deepen and flourish and continue her legacy in our community. So now, in that spirit, it is my pleasure to welcome back an Ann Arbor favorite who has flown in fresh from New York just to offer us a personal introduction to Basil Twist today. Please welcome to the stage, Machine Dazzle.
Hello. Let me just make an adjustment. Oh, maybe one more. I mean, you know, it's specific. Think pink, act locally and globally. I heard about Basil Twist years before we were actually introduced, but I remember the night that we were. We ran into each other at Therapy. Therapy was a gay bar in Hell's Kitchen in New York City. I'd soon be banned from that bar for unexpected water balloon activity and glitter damage while performing with the Dazzle dancers. When you become friends with Basil Twist, something magical happens. You're immediately embraced by an entire family of puppeteers, puppets, and those who love them. I've been lucky to experience much of Basil's work over the years spanning theater, dance, opera, film, and beyond. I remember when I saw Symphonie Fantastique, where silks manipulated underwater become characters that dance, sing, laugh, and love. Arias with a Twist, a collaboration with legendary chanteurs Joey Arias, blend the soft, careful world of puppetry with the sharp edge and wit of cabaret, drag, and couture. Last year, I was fortunate to be in London to see the stage adaptation of My Neighbor Totoro, one of the largest, most expressive, and eagerly anticipated puppets I've ever witnessed. Turn page. Luckier still am I to have collaborated with Basil on several occasions. We celebrated the centennial of the Abrams Arts Center with the show Sisters Follies Between Two Worlds, which remembers Alice and Irene Lewison, the eccentric sisters, played by Joey Arias and Julie Atlas Muse, who opened the downtown theater. I costumed the humans on stage, and Basil created world after world, following various historic productions on the acclaimed Abrams stage. Every December brings the Puppet Parlor at Here Center for the Arts, where Basil has invited me and so many others to honor and experiment with the ever-expanding genre of puppetry. This past December, my Puppet Parlor piece featured me as a lip-syncing oyster, while Basil puppeted a sea urchin in the famous Dorothy B. Williams Theater, named after Basil Twist's grandmother. One of my favorite annual traditions is watching Basil's spider puppet descend from the Jefferson Market Library Tower in New York City's West Village every Halloween. And if you gain access, you can go up the spiral stairs of the tower, share an intimate moment with Basil's friends and family, watch the famous Village Halloween Parade go by, and even puppet the spider yourself. What have I learned from Basil Twist? Puppets are alive, human, beautiful, comedic, and sexy. From the world's largest and most celebrated stages to the smallest, most intimate nightclubs, Basil Twist teaches us the importance of the land of make-believe. In those moments, Basil has us all in the same room believing what we are seeing and feeling. Where the biggest, riskiest dreams and hopes are possible, and the smallest gesture speaks volumes. Please welcome to the stage the most beloved artist that I know, Basil Twist.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. This is my puppet Stickman. I'll tell you a little bit about Stickman later. Thank you for having me here. Thank you, Penny Stamps and Christina and all the staff here who's been great. And thank you, Machine, for your intro. It means so much to me. I adore that artist. I know you all do too, who've seen him. So I'm so glad to be introed by him. It's awesome. And let me put him away. I'm going to put him over here. Yes, I'm a puppeteer. I'm a puppeteer. I do many things, though. I'm a director and a designer and a set designer and I do all kinds of things. But it all comes from the place of being a puppeteer. That's where it all starts. So even if I'm directing some show and there's not anything like puppetry that you might be familiar with in it, it comes from a place of being a puppeteer. And that means making things come alive. And I've been doing a lot more of that kind of directing and designing, and I don't perform so much anymore, so I was a little nervous doing that, so thank you. A lot of people ask me, how did I get into puppetry? How did that start? And it's true, I'm a third-generation puppeteer. It's in my family, but not the way that, there's other puppetry traditions where, like in Sicily, where the tradition is passed from father to son to his son, the same puppets. It's not that way at all for me. It was on my mother's side of the family, and my mom, when I was growing up, she was like an amateur puppeteer. Like she was doing puppet shows with some other moms as a kind of a social activity, and they would perform at birthday parties or at hospitals, and I was right there, backstage, and that's probably where I got the bug. Let's see. Oh, there I am doing my puppet shows when I was a little kid. But it probably was not just my mom, because my mother's father, who I never met because he died before I was born, so my grandfather, he was primarily a big band leader in the 30s. His name was Griff Williams. He had the Griff Williams Orchestra, and it started in San Francisco, where I'm from. And San Francisco, yes? I just spent the past 7 months in San Francisco, and I'm working with the San Francisco Opera, and I just love it there so much. So my grandfather Griff, he used to play with his big band, but he had these puppets made of other famous band leaders. That would be Paul Whiteman. And he had puppets of Harry James and Cab Calloway and famous figures of the day. And he had a puppet of himself, too. And he was a band. It was a dance band. America's Most Danceable Music, it was called. And when people would go out and dance. And then he would, as a kind of bonus, would bring out the puppets. Eventually, he settled in Chicago because he toured so much, and it made sense to be in the center of the country. And he would bring out the puppets, and it was like a special treat on top of it. But I guess how my mother inspired me was, I think, also genetic, because my grandfather did it too. I also love music. I'm pretty musical, so I think that comes also through that side of the family. And when I was about 10 years old, my grandmother gave me the puppets as a birthday present, and I had these incredible puppets. Here's just a little clip of the puppets in action. The music is my grandfather's orchestra. This is a tune called Yerumi. That's Harry James. That's my grandfather, Griff. That's the puppet of Griff. That's Toscanini. That's my grandfather's hands playing. That's Paul Whiteman playing the drums. Dream Music, the Dream Music Orchestra. Dream Music was my grandfather's theme song. And so the puppetry program that I run in New York at the Here Art Center that presents the Puppet Parlor and other shows is called the Dream Music Puppetry Program because I love dreams and I love music. And so when I can have music involved with puppetry, I'm really into it. We have a puppet festival next week, and I'm so thrilled. All of the pieces have live music. It's so cool. It doesn't always happen. And those puppets are on display in the theater, which is indeed named after my grandmother in New York. So I'm very attached to that place. Very tiny space, only about room for 60 people to squeeze in. Perfect scale for puppetry. Although puppetry can read to much larger houses, I mean, that stickman is tiny, but you can see him from the back. They're so graphic, they're so clear. So as a kid, yes, I was obsessed with puppets. I was also totally in the Sesame Street generation. I was born in 1969, so you can do the math. I was totally like, Sesame Street was made for me, and I loved it. And then, of course, the Muppet Show came along. Did anyone see the new Muppet Show it was perfection. That was fantastic, the new Muppet Show that just happened. I think all the attempts that they've tried to modernize the Muppets haven't worked. And that, if you haven't seen it, it's fantastic. It's true Muppet Show. So I was obsessed with the Muppets, like totally obsessed with the Muppets. Here's my Miss Piggy poster. This is my favorite poster. My walls were covered with all the Muppets. I was so into it. I loved Miss Piggy. There was also another puppeteer I was crazy about in San Francisco. He was a street performer named Bob Hartman. He did incredible, beautiful puppet shows and drew huge crowds of adults who loved his shows and laughed wildly. Bob Hartman and the Muppets were like my real influences as a kid. When I was also 10 years old, that was a big year for me, my family visited New York, and we managed to score a visit to the Muppet Workshop. And this was like the peak of the Muppet Show. I think the Muppet Show, it was the fifth season of the Muppet Show, so it was really, Miss Piggy was like global superstar. And I got to go to the Muppet Workshop. It was like this dream come true. I cried with joy as a kid, which was unusual for kids. And here I am at the Muppet Workshop with Bert and Ernie. And here's me with a chicken. I just wanted to get that picture in. So while I was at that, and I'm sort of doing this as a biography. I'm telling my story, how I got into it. So when I was at the Muppet Workshop, I was so excited. I was so excited. And the people there said, wow, you're really into puppets. You should go see this show that's currently playing on Broadway. It's this French puppeteer who's in town named Philippe Gentil. And this was 1980. So my family went to go see this show, and it was mind-blowing. This is some of the work of Philippe Gentil. This is the actor Jean-Louis École, who I later got to know. It was so different from the Muppet Show. It was like existential and strange and French and beautiful and dreamy and expansive and there was one piece in particular that was wild. It was called Round Like a Cube, and it was these transformations of all these objects that kept transforming into other things and filling up with water and then crushing down into something else and then splitting into parts and eventually became something that my childhood mind didn't quite appreciate how sexual this was. But it definitely made a huge impression on me. Like, wow, and we went, and this show wasn't doing very well. There were hardly any people in the theater, so we went at least twice to see it. It blew my mind and cracked open what I thought puppetry could be. So I was a puppet nerd, and I would make my own puppets, and if I had to do a book report at school, I was pretty shy, and so I would do it with a puppet. Like I did, my report about ancient Greece with my dog puppet with the toga. So it was sort of a coping mechanism for me to use puppetry. And of course, I got A+ on that for my investment and my creativity on that book report that I did. But I kept doing that in high school. I was, a proud member of the sci-fi club, and I was making my own kind of really outrageous Halloween costumes that were kind of like puppets, kind of like how Big Bird, you'd have your arm up here working the head, and I'd make these crazy Halloween costumes that you couldn't even fit through a door. So they weren't really practical, but I was so passionate. I remember my parents would say, "Do you need to stay home from school to finish your Halloween costume?" Which was an example of how supportive my parents have been through my whole life. So I did that. I kind of kept doing that, but I would never bring those costumes to high school, like for the costume contest. No way. Because I was too passionate about it, and I was too shy. So that was too much to put out there. And I also started to get a sneaking suspicion that maybe there was something wrong with me. That there was something about puppets and my obsession with Miss Piggy that was maybe infantile or maybe a little bit feminine. And in high school, I started to get clear that wasn't cool for me. So I kind of put it away. I was like a closeted puppeteer. And I actually, put it away for about 2 years, which seemed like an eternity. And I went to a very college prep school in San Francisco, so I was really pushed towards going to college, and I ended up in this. I ended up at Oberlin College in Ohio, and Oberlin's amazing, but I also hated being there. Like, I didn't know what I was doing. I had lost my true self. And one day, I stumbled into the alternative studies department and found a book on internships in the arts, and it kind of magically fell open to this page, an internship at the Center for Puppetry Arts. And I was like, the Center for Puppetry Arts, which is in Atlanta, Georgia. Yes, you know it. Did you visit the Center for Puppetry Arts as a kid? Yes, everybody did in Atlanta. It's the kind of our nation's largest institution regarding puppetry is in Atlanta. I said, I'm doing that. I'm good at that. That's what I love. That's what excites me. That's what I was good at as a kid. I'm leaving Ohio. I'm gonna go do this thing, but first, I said I'm gonna go to New York. So I moved to New York, and I've had so many wonderful blessings in my life. I moved to New York. Within 2 days of being in New York, I went up to the Library for Performing Arts at Lincoln Center, and I had been looking in the stacks under P for puppetry, and I was just gonna find all kinds of stuff. I had looked in the phone book, puppets, when there was a phone book, and I found the puppet people, so I contacted them, and I just was like committed to getting into puppetry. And when I went up to the library, there was this exhibit of the work of Julie Taymor, who is an incredible theater director who happened to have gone to Oberlin, who most people might know her work because she did The Lion King. So she's a really, truly visionary director. And there were all these amazing, beautiful, strange, weird puppets. So I met Julie, and I started to work with her. And I started to get into the scene in New York City. I met to the Puppet Guild, and I met the kind of rinky-dinky puppet people, and I was working with Julie in her more artsy-fartsy way. I met somebody at the Puppet Guild who had studied with Philippe Gentil, the French puppeteer I had seen as a kid. And I was like, whoa, 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 how did you possibly study with him? Well, he went and took a workshop in France at the Institut International de Marionnette, the International Institute for Puppetry, in Charleville-Mézières, France. And I thought, I want to do that. So I wrote to them, and they had just started a 3-year program where you could go and completely devote yourself to puppetry. And I applied, and I got in. So I went to France. This is the institute in France, and I lived there for 3 years, and I met all the greatest puppeteers in the world. I mean, really, I lucked out. This was like the most incredible training that anyone could have. And plus, I was in France. So I was exposed to art and culture in a way that just wasn't possible for me where I was growing up in San Francisco. Something was completely different there. And France really supported the arts. I didn't have to pay a cent to go to that school. Even though I came from another country, it's maybe different there now. It was really international. It was a very small group. It was only 14 people, but only 4 of them were from France. Everyone was from other parts of the world: Brazil, Korea, Finland, England, Germany. A lot of people from Eastern Europe, too, because there was a big puppetry tradition in Eastern Europe. This was sort of the Western alternative, speaking to the puppeteer as a total artist who understands everything, all aspects of theater. And that experience, I did meet Philippe Gentil, and I met many, many, many other great puppeteers from all over the world, including Japan, which was very, very important to me. And they would put on different festivals there. There's a huge international festival that still happens every 2 years there, the largest gathering of puppeteers in the world. And they would have, in the interim years, kind of interesting festivals with different themes. And they had one called Musique en Mouvement, music in movement. So it was about music in relationship to puppetry. And they had recreations of Baroque operas that there was a whole tradition of Baroque operas created for puppet theater when people had their little private theaters in their chateau. There was also very avant-garde music where the instruments were these weird constructions that kind of took some sort of animation or manipulation to make them make sound, so it sort of was puppetry adjacent, all kinds of stuff related to music. But one thing there wasn't was a truly abstract puppet show. I had started to pay attention to the history of art and how visual art in particular has always moved forward with new movements, new ideas. And really that kind of development of visual arts, a key moment was at the beginning of the 20th century when abstraction came into the fore of what people could do. Kandinsky and Miro creating abstract work that wasn't necessarily figurative or indicative of anything other than emotion, color, shape, and form. I thought, where is the puppet show that's like that? And I wasn't seeing actually anything like it. Even if it was kind of geometric, you could still tell that that was the girl and that was the boy. And there was nothing purely abstract. The way that music doesn't need to have a story. It just makes you feel something. It goes fast, it goes slow, it goes high, it goes low, and it brings emotion, but there's not necessarily a story to it. So that got me thinking. And eventually I graduated from school. I moved back to New York. I had another very important education in New York, which was joining the world of nightlife and cabarets, and that's where I really know Machine from, how we met at therapy. The drag scene, this was in the 90s, the drag scene was just gurgling up. RuPaul had been tearing through the East Village, and that world was fascinating and fun, and I started doing shows on those tiny post-stamp size stages. A very different experience when you're performing for people who have been dancing and they're drinking and suddenly the music stops and there's a show. You gotta be fast and get their attention and do something strong and be quick and get on and off. And I learned a lot from that. But in the meantime, I was thinking about my abstract puppet show, and I finally got the chance to make it. So this is a photo of me experimenting with fabric in water. And I had this idea, if I put fabric in water, ooh, that's cool. And I could sit and look at fabric and water for hours. And eventually I created a piece called Symphonie Fantastique, which was kind of my breakthrough piece. Because I worked with puppeteers around in New York, but this is a piece that really came through. So I'm gonna show you a brief clip of Symphonie Fantastique. There's that fabric. This is really what the audience saw from the front of the aquarium. Someone was playing piano, which is amazing. Feathers underwater are completely gorgeous. This is Christmas mylar underwater, those mylar curtains. Here we are backstage. This is how we did it. It's really just like a puppet show. It's just people working stuff on sticks and strings in a little space behind a curtain. It's just what we were manipulating and bringing to life was not a horse or a princess or anything. It was just these shapes that responded to the music, that made the music visual. And boy, this piece exploded. This show inaugurated the little theater that became named after my grandmother, the little 60-seat theater. Thank you, Arias, Symphonie Fantastique. So that piece was like, it exploded. It was huge. But you could not, everybody was coming to see the show. It was such a tiny audience that it was always sold out. So it was literally the hottest ticket in town. We were on CNN, Time Magazine, it was like this phenomenon. And it was reviewed by the New York Times as a theater piece, a gushing review. And then it was also reviewed as a dance piece. And then it was also reviewed as a music piece. And then it was also reviewed as a visual arts piece. This is kind of unheard of, that a piece would be reviewed by the same newspaper 4 times in different genres. So it really was the breakthrough piece for me. And it played for a long time, and then I toured it and eventually brought it back and started to create this community around me of wonderful puppeteers and people who came to work with me and who also had their own work that they were working on that I could help, encourage, and sometimes present at the theater. So Symphonie Fantastique was key for me. It also launched me into the world of music, which was so valuable to me. At a high level, the next piece I did was at Lincoln Center. And I did not an abstract piece, but a very figurative piece, Petrushka, which was the Stravinsky ballet. And I did a piece with beautiful puppets, rigorous tradition based on the Japanese tradition that I had learned about, that I even knew about as a kid, but I met people, actual practitioners when I was in France, where 3 people work together to work one puppet. And it's known as bunraku, that style of puppetry, or that bunraku style, is where 3 people work together, and you can actually see the puppeteers at work, and it's very current now. We've actually, probably a lot of us have seen that kind of work, where you can see the puppeteer, but you still believe in the puppet, like what I was doing with Stickman. So I worked in the world of music, but I also was so fascinated by Japan, and I had this great opportunity to go to Japan and create a piece. And I actually was very curious about a tradition I had seen when I was also in France from the island of Awaji, which is a tiny island in Japan that has a very strong puppetry tradition. And they had something where, you know, those sliding screen doors, they had a show that was all sliding screen doors. Just doors opening, painted doors, opening and closing, flipping. No story. Just beautiful images, movement, and I was fascinated by that. So I went to Japan, I studied this almost extinct art form, and I made a show based on that. It's called Dogugaeshi, and it traveled to Japan, it traveled around the world. A very beloved show of mine, Dogugaeshi. Okay, now I have to break up my notes, because I'm meandering. So Dogugaeshi, that was a high point of my work, and I did that show a year ago, so I'm still doing that show. I also, since I had been working with music, I did get invited to work and collaborate, and eventually, kind of the highest musical art form is opera. So I started working in opera. The first opera piece that I did was A Sleeping Beauty, and Respighi's La Bella Dormente nel Bosco, and it was had a very fancy festival, and it was extremely ambitious. I just said, because Respighi had written this piece for a company that did string marionettes in Italy, I thought, well, we have to do it with strings. Now, I had made Stickman, and Stickman, by the way, I made in France at school. So this puppet is over 30 years old. But he's the only string puppet I've had ever really made. And I worked with great masters at that school. Álvaro Apocalypse from Brazil is the man who taught me how to carve that puppet and how to create the exact joints and mechanisms. He was inspired by an American tradition, which is the Dwiggins tradition, an American craftsman who made very beautiful marionettes. And then I had a Swedish mentor named Mikael Meshka who taught me how to string it, and he suggested this very tiny control at the top, which is shaped like an H. It's a Malaysian-style control. So this is an example of what my training in France was like. I had a Brazilian teacher teaching me an American tradition with a Swedish master showing me how to string it with a Malaysian control. That was my experience there. And I made that puppet. And with this opera, I said, I want to do string marionettes, big ones, which was very bold and wild, and it's kind of how I've rolled every time. I just say, I want to do something, and we just have to figure it out. And figure it out we did. I then did another opera. This is Hansel and Gretel, with a giant witch. She's 16 feet tall. You can see that's a normal-sized human there, this little gingerbread person. And that's actually an opera singer inside of the rig. So she actually sang. It was a man. It was a tenor singing. And he's strapped in. His feet are strapped in at the waist. Oh, I have a pointer here. So his feet are there. And he's wearing a mask, but that's his mouth, his real mouth. So his head was larger. And then he had these arm mechanisms that he controlled, which made his arms twice as long. And then there's 3 people underneath who are working the lower half. There was a pneumatic pedestal, like a TV, like one of those old TV pedestals you would see when they open wide and Saturday Night Live, you would see those camera pedestals. There's a camera pedestal under there that he was wearing ski boots on, and then there's 3 people. One is rolling the pedestal around, one is making it go up and down so that she could walk with steps, and then there was a 3rd person who was moving the ass. And she was amazing. And I wish they would still do this opera. It was incredible. So I did all I had. Suddenly I was doing opera. And I was like at the height of the kind of the art world. And then somehow I got pulled back downtown, which is where my roots were, with the drag queens and the nightclubs. I worked with a very amazing avant-garde artist named Lee Nagrin, and I created a piece with her in her home that was, you know, an early immersive piece where everyone followed you through like a haunted house. You could only have 20 people at a time see the show. And after that, I had this amazing opportunity to create a show with one of my favorite performers, Joey Arias, who Machine mentioned, and this was a show called Arias with a Twist. So Arias with a Twist, I made it in the tiny, tiny theater where we did Symphonie Fantastique, the tiny, seriously tiny theater, where also we do the puppet parlor that Machine has been a part of. I still marvel, how did we ever fit everything in this space? Joey had been working with Cirque du Soleil, and he was back in New York, and I just created a show around Joey. So the quality is not great, but I'm going to show you clips from that show, Arias with a Twist. It's a UFO made out of 2 walks from Chinatown. Joey in the spaceship on the probe table. I brought out my grandfather's puppets for Joey and had them be the band because Joey's an incredible singer. Joey lands in the jungle. He eats a mushroom and has a psychedelic trip which takes him to completely other worlds, including meeting devils in hell, very sexual, sexy devils, because Joey's sexy. And Joey eventually returns to New York City, and we recreated New York City on that tiny stage, because this was Joey's return to New York. We had a big Vegas finale. There's my grandfather's Cab Calloway puppet. And everything came together in this show. It was my grandmother's theater, it was the nightlife, it was like the Muppet Show because it was this one live performer in this soft sculpture world. And it was, again, this fabulous sensation in this tiny theater. That was 18 years ago, and we're gonna bring it back this year. So I'm planning on it. I'm still raising the funds to make it happen. But come to New York and see Arias with a Twist in the fall. Arias was a highlight for me of creating and collaborating and really working with a team of wonderful, loving, fun, sexy, cool puppeteers making this world happen. It took an army of people to make it happen, and it was one of my favorite projects ever. I just put a few other random things in here to show you. Here's a weird one. So I'm from California, and I'm always longing to be back in California, and I had developed a relationship with the La Jolla Playhouse, which is this great regional theater in La Jolla near San Diego in California. And I had done several projects with them, been part of different projects, and they wanted to do site-specific work, which was becoming a buzzword at the time, of like doing stuff, theater pieces outside of theaters. So doing it in a parking lot, or in a supermarket, or in an elevator, creating theatrical pieces in unusual spaces. And I was like, well, if you're gonna be in San Diego, you should do a show at the beach. That's the reason I want to be there anyway. So I had to think of, what do I want to do at the beach? What would I do at the beach? I thought, well, where do the puppets come from? Where would they come from? Oh, they have to come out of the water. I guess that's the only place you know where to hide except for in the water. Oh, what would come from the water? And then I came up with this show based on the birth of Aphrodite, who was born from the sea foam. So the ancient Greek legend of Aphrodite is that she was born from the sea foam, and this is a show called Sea Foam Sleepwalk that we did at the beach in San Diego. It's not easy to develop a piece like this. You kind of need to think, okay, what am I doing? I have a wonderful studio in New York that I've had for years, but it's tiny and cramped, and I had a little outdoor space, and we built this incredible creature, Aphrodite, and then I couldn't get it out of the space. Somehow we managed to get it out. We took it to a beach in New York, kind of Far Rockaway. It's not as nice as California, but we drove the truck out there, parked the truck near the beach site, and we would take the subway out every day to open up the truck and work on Aphrodite. And eventually brought this to California and presented this show on the beach. I mean, the whole point of the show was to have Aphrodite born out of the water. That was just the whole point. But, you know, for me, I make a lot of shows where the point is like, I want to do something underwater, or I want to do something abstract. There's not a story. Eventually, everybody likes a story. So there's something about how she was created. There's these titans fighting, and someone throws a body part into the ocean, and the bloody sea foam creates Aphrodite. And then there's these different aspects of love. And there was a story and a finale that we made up. But it's the example of making a show because the main point was this. I wanted this to happen. And I wanted people to be walking down the beach and be like, whoa. And of course, people gathered to see it, but a lot of people were, they're surfing and enjoying the beach, and this was happening. I know, I just loved this piece. I wish I was still doing it in beaches all around the world. So I did, downtown experimental stuff. I did uptown opera fancy stuff. And I did stuff in the ocean. And then I kind of had skipped Midtown, which is Broadway. So I got pulled into a couple Broadway shows. I still feel like an outsider. Like I don't, it's part of a way of being a puppeteer. You're like an outsider, no matter what. And I've done actually now 4 different Broadway shows. But it's great to approach things as an outsider. It's kind of the puppet way. Here's an example of a Broadway show I worked on. This is a little bit of rehearsal footage. This is Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and the Oompa Loompas were humanettes, which is you have to work with, not with traditional puppeteers, but with dancers. And so here, these are humanettes in action in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory for the Oompa Loompas. It's just in rehearsal. Let's see. Christina, I've lost track of my light. How am I doing, time-wise? Yeah, I do. Okay, so I'm gonna click through a little bit more. I did some ballet, so that was working with dancers on Broadway, and I've been thrilled to work with dancers. I love dancers. I think they're the greatest artists, actually. So it's awesome for me to work with ballet dancers. This was a sort of a kind of a Wizard of Oz story. This was Cinderella that I did using a lot of silk, which was my thing. And this is a big piece I did, this is Rite of Spring, which was using mountains of silk, since I had worked on Broadway and with opera houses, I wanted to use the huge stage to do an abstract show, kind of like Symphonie Fantastique, but on a huge scale. So these are pictures from the Rite of Spring, which was a huge privilege for me to do. And then I'm gonna show you some pictures, some other stuff, other opera I did. This was a piece called Book of Mountains and Seas that happened during the pandemic. I actually was working a lot during the pandemic. I did Book of Mountains and Seas. I did this other opera in France during the pandemic because even though it was full lockdown, in France, an opera director is considered an essential worker. So I could still work while everything was fully locked down, and we created this opera, which was then streamed online. This is Emanuela de Negri that Machine knows for another opera. He worked with her. She's fantastic. So this is Titon et l'Aurore with an amazing Baroque ensemble. And then I also did, during the pandemic, incredibly, I worked on Totoro, My Neighbor Totoro. So just a little clip of Totoro.
The spirits of the forest started to hide from us. Frightened, but also disappointed. But once in a while, they meet someone like you, May.
So Totoro, I'm part of a team. I just was in charge of the puppets, but the puppets fit into the whole story, the way that the house moves, the way that the whole show was puppeteered. The corn comes alive, and here's our beloved characters from Totoro, but a huge responsibility to work on Totoro and to make that happen. I developed Totoro during the pandemic. I was in San Francisco with my family, and I needed to create, this image, this classic image from Totoro. So I made something in the backyard with my family. This is how you could work during the pandemic with your pod, and that eventually became this. And then there's the standing figure of Totoro. This is me and the director, Falla McDermott. We were working on an opera. We had some free time, so we started figuring out, I knew he wanted to be inflatable, so I got a snowman inflatable just to see how that would work. That eventually became trying different techniques to make. There's the iconic scene with Totoro at the bus stop where he jumps in the air. And this was us during the pandemic, wearing masks and doing the testing and stuff, so we could get together and figure out how Totoro would actually jump in the air. Here's a mock-up of Totoro that I made, and this is eventually what Totoro looks like, which you saw in the brochure. Here's the beloved cat bus, and this is the workshop we did of the cat bus, which was all plastic inflatables playing with just plastic sheeting. You can iron it together and make anything, and that's how we figured out how to do the cat bus. This is a headless cat bus, but it was like, yeah, that's the way, and eventually, that's the real cat bus. And here's Totoro and his cat best friend. Anyway, that was a highlight of my career. I know that there's a Totoro sushi place here, so I know people love Totoro. And I do want to answer questions, so I just want to say one thing about puppetry that I think is what's magical about puppetry is that puppetry it's not the suspension of disbelief, it's actually belief. It's when you believe in something. When you see Stickman, you believe in it. And there's something about the mystery of something coming to life that is profound. And it's not just for kids, it's for all of us. Maybe kids are closer to the mystery of what it is to be alive. But I think puppetry connects us with that mystery. And that's why puppetry is important and is profound. And I want to do one quick other demo, which I promised I would do. And that is, I'm going to use a piece of silk to just show how it doesn't need to be a horse or an animal. It could just be abstract and come to life. So this is my last bit.